Hi, my name is Sheila. Welcome. In this video, we're actually going to be talking about the Black Lives Matter lawsuit that has been in the news the last couple of days. And to be honest, I didn't know any of this was going on, that this lawsuit was coming down. Maybe some of you didn't know either. I had heard a few things. People always question where the money goes. When you have an organization that has to submit financial documents, and there is transparency and oversight, people do get an opportunity to look at the money and to see where it is going. When it's a very large organization, generally more eyes are going to be on it. People want to know that they're giving to a cause that is going to use the money just as the foundation or organization or nonprofit said it was going to use the money. So people are in it for the good, and that's what they're looking for. This is definitely going to be a first take for me. We're going to start by looking at some of the news that has just come out about this. I haven't even read through it all. Some of the numbers are a little shocking to say the least. Some people would probably be like, oh, wow, that's a whole lot of money. And, then we're going to jump into the lawsuit and take a look at what they are actually claiming. So, first of all, let's see what's going on with the news here. Let's see if I can pull that up. It's sort of been out here for a couple of days now. But let's check into that first, just so we can get a little bit more up to speed on some of what's going on in the news. Let's see if we can pull this up here. All right, we're going to head over to, we've got quite a few things here. Yeah, so you can see here some of what is going on, what's being said, what's in the news. Let's see, Black Lives Matter grassroots chapters sue Global Foundation over funds. And this is straight from The Guardian. You can see here what they're running. And yes, Guardian, we'd love to give you a hand too. This is exactly what we're talking about. It says coalition sues foundation alleging mismanagement. The assets that we built are under control of consultants. I have been a part of a lot of organizations, and in some instances, yes, they do rely very heavily on consultants. And I have yet to see, I feel like I've got hair or something on my face. There is a pine cone sitting on the cable line out there. It's totally distracting me. But I have heard that complaint before. This is not anything new. I've definitely heard people in organizations complain about the amount of money that goes to consultants that they feel like could be better spent on the ground, being more engaged with the community, getting information out to the community. So I've heard that before. This is not anything new, or anything that is specific to them. A lot of organizations hear this. We want to know that, there's this concern that a lot of money is going towards administration and really not going toward the work. So we want to, make sure we're having conversations with organizations when we're giving our money to sort of understand where that money is going to go. So consultants, yes, this is one of those things that comes up. So it says a complaint was filed on Thursday by BLM Grassroots, which is an entity made up of 26 BLM chapters in the US, UK, and Canada. And so they're saying that, wow, they're saying that the funds have been mismanaged and that local chapters have been cut out of decision making. At least that's what the Guardian is reporting. Let's see what else we've got going on here. We've got courthouse news. Lawsuit accuses Black Lives Matter head of siphoning more than $10 million. You guys, that is a lot of money. I think that is what is probably so shocking to a lot of people. It's the actual amount of money when you look at it. The LA Times is, questioning, hey, what is this going to cost the movement? Are people going to say, I don't want to be a part of this organization? We have to keep in mind that sometimes it never even gets to the point where someone is proven guilty, but it becomes sort of a black eye on the organization to even be accused of some of these things, or to even have these sorts of allegations out there. It can be harmful because people will say, okay, well, I don't want to be associated with that group anymore. Donors will say, okay, I'm not sure where my money is going, so I'm not going to give any more money. And people who, are partners in these communities who may have wanted to work with groups before now maybe want to back off. So there can be just a detrimental effect, negative consequences just from having allegations being made and a complaint filed. So there's a lot to unpack here in terms of not just the complaint, but the consequences of even filing a complaint for everybody involved. Because as you can imagine, some people are probably questioning the motives of the people who filed the lawsuit. So it takes a lot for people to file a lawsuit and to move forward with something like this. So again, you see the 10 million, again, that's going to be the number that's going to be really shocking for a lot of people. LA Times, New York Post, Washington Times, so everybody is sort of talking about this right now. All right, so let's head over to see what they're saying on their website, because I think they have posted something on their website. So give me just a moment to get over there and we'll see what that says. They didn't say a whole lot, it looks like. My throat is actually a little dry this morning. I initially thought it was going to be like a really long statement, but it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like it's really short. And I think we're going to have to kind of go through it here. So here they've got this board of directors response. And really, there's this part here that they've got up here. And then you can come down here and read the longer statement. And it says, it starts with this statement of, today we should be talking about Biden's Safer America plan. So it's, the setup here is we should be focusing on these other things, but now we've got this distraction. So it even says further down, we should be focused on the work of liberation and Black joy. Instead, we face yet again another round of struggle for control of one organization. So for them, they see this as a conversation about control and who is going to be managing and leading the organization. Now, this is nothing new for an organization that is looking to, impact change. There's always going to be that dynamic of, who gets the final say so. Like I said, I've been in a number of organizations, and that's one of those things that comes up. So you can go to the website, you can read what their response statement is right here for everyone to read. So it just got released September 1st. So I'm going to head over actually to the complaint now. Let's see if we can head over to the complaint and get away from some of this so that we can read what is actually going on, because I think there are actually 5 claims that they're making in this. And so I want us to be able to sort of head through some of them. Now, I think the actual complaint is maybe about 20 pages. So I don't know that I'm going to read every single page, but I am going to try to go through a lot of this so that we can take a look at it and see what they're actually talking about. So let's head over there. I'm sorry, I have been having some allergy issues this morning. I did go to the gym and work out. All right, let me make sure I got everything here like we wanted. Everything's looking good here. Okay, so you can see this complaint here. And like I said, it's 20 pages, filed in the Central District of LA County. Black Lives Matter Grassroots Inc. Versus the Global Network Foundation. And then it specifically also names as a defendant Bowers Consulting Firm, and then an individual. So over there to the right, you can see the complaint for damages for unfair business practices, intentional misrepresentation, fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment. And they're asking for a jury trial. All right, so this first piece, the nature of the action, is just getting into the background here, you guys. I feel like I need to get my pen to sort of highlight some of what they're talking about here, because, this first sentence here, it is very strong language. It's very strong language. This is a case of a rogue administrator, a middleman turned usurper who was hired to collect donations and account for expenditures of the Black Lives Matter movement, formerly operating as BLM. I mean, that first sentence lets you know that this is going to be a very adversarial perspective that they are taking in regards to the defendant. They are coming with the gloves on, like they are ready for a match here. And it sounds like, they're not holding back at all. They're calling him rogue. He is a usurper. He was hired to do one thing here, or part of, maybe this is the essence of what their claim is. He was supposed to be doing this thing right here. It says the donations were given based on the well-documented work of the organization. And it says BLM organized the global network as a matter of convenience. We've got just a little bit of a typo there. Matter of convenience to collect donations and fulfill certain administrative duties. However, after siphoning more than $10 million in fees from donors, Mr. Bowers decided he could not let go of his personal piggy bank when more than 300 movement leaders insisted he resign. Now, you guys, let me just sort of say this from the perspective of a person writing a complaint. This sort of long paragraph that goes on is going to be very challenging for me to read, and maybe a little challenging for you to follow along. I am a person who likes to break things up, to give the eyes a moment to rest and the brain a moment to catch up. And it can be a little difficult to follow. So I'm just going to let you know right now, this is not typically how I write. And so I'm going to struggle with this a little bit to be able to talk about this, given that it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on, and on line after line. I'm trying to make sure I can actually see this stuff. But again, okay, so again, gloves off. Okay, he's rogue, he's siphoning, he's usurping, and he took $10 million in quote fees. Notice how they put quotation marks around the fee part. It says he could not let go of his personal piggy bank. Again, you guys, let me just come back because I need to be able to face you, one-on-one here. When they call it a personal piggy bank, they are trying to make a point that, we are alleging here that it wasn't about him doing some other work here. We are saying he took the money for his own personal benefit, for him, not for, some other things he might have been doing, but for him to use in a certain way. It's a really kind of harsh allegation. And again, these are allegations. This is a complaint. They have to go to court, work all of this stuff out. And you know how it works. In the end, the jury is going to be making a decision. But let's pop back over here. And well, why don't we make it so that you could actually see it? That would be a good thing. All right, so back over here, let's see. It says, instead, he continued to betray the public trust. We're down here. He continued to betray the public trust by self-dealing and breaching his fiduciary duties, meaning he owed the organization an obligation. Remember, he was working for them. That's what they said. His actions have led GNF into multiple investigations by the IRS, various state attorney generals. Okay, so, usually it's attorneys general, blazing a path of irreparable harm to BLM in less than 18 months. 18 months. Yeah. Okay. While BLM leaders and movement workers were on the street risking their lives, Mr. Bowers remained in his cushy offices, devising a scheme of fraud and misrepresentation to break the implied impact contract between donors and BLM. Again, okay, so let's just have a little bit of face to face here about this again. Okay, what they have said. Let me just because I want to point this out. When you're filing a complaint, you're laying the groundwork, you're presenting the image of what this looks like. And they have called his offices cushy. Okay, so at this point, I kind of now want to see what his office looks like. I mean, are there pictures? Because I'm just wondering, one person's cushy is another person's overkill. If you've seen the pictures of Mar-a-Lago, then you have an idea of what I'm talking about. Some of us prefer minimalism. You see my background here, so that obviously isn't me. But they're saying he remained in his cushy office while devising, okay? They are basically saying he concocted a scheme of fraud and misrepresentation to sort of come between the donors and BLM and this work that they were supposed to be doing. This is what they're talking about. This is very hard to hear because part of this is there's so many people who are on the ground working and volunteering. And a lot of times those people are not getting paid. They're not getting paid for their time. Sometimes they don't even get reimbursed for the gas that they may be spending, for the food that they may be picking up and sharing with other people. So there's a lot of work that goes unpaid. And so sometimes we have some difficulty when there are consultants and companies and firms and agencies that step in and they do get paid. And then they do get paid a lot of money. And it's like you have these people on the ground, like struggling, like the people who are struggling are already the ones doing the work. How do we fairly and equitably compensate them for the work that we're doing? It's going to be really hard to do that if we're sending a whole lot of money out to, one or two consultants, three or four agencies. And so, I hear this conversation. The thing about it is we want to make sure, especially when we're dealing with consultants and agencies who are people of color, because we understand that traditionally they have been underpaid. So we want to make sure that they're being fairly paid. But this lawsuit is bringing up a lot of questions about what was going on with Mr. Bowers. And there's a lot of concern here. Like I said, I'd love to see a picture of these offices. All right, let's head back over so that you can actually look at the lawsuit, not me. Okay, jurisdiction. Yeah. Let me actually get back over to where I need to be. Okay, jurisdiction. Yeah, okay, so LA County. Okay, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. And then they sort of go through the parties here. Black Lives Matter, this sort of coalition of these grassroots organizations. Then you have the Global Network Foundation. You have Bowers Consulting Firm. You have Mr. Bowers. Yes. All right. True names. Okay. So we'll go through all of that and we'll get to number 11. And it's just saying that they believe, and I'm on, number 11 here, line 6, acted in concert with one another to commit the wrongful acts alleged herein, aided, abetted, incited, compelled, and or coerced. You guys, that's a lot. Yeah, and then 13 is listing again unfair business practices, misrepresentation, constructive fraud. Yeah, so those are basically the allegations. So the first piece here talks about alter ego, agency, successor, and joint employer. So this is sort of the relationship, and this is what they're going through here to sort of talk about. Typically, when you're setting up a company, okay, you're setting up an LLC, a corporation, and you're the one who's also the president, the head of whatever it is. You're trying to separate yourself personally from that other entity. That entity is a separate entity. So you can't be commingling funds and just writing checks out of their account to pay your bills. That's not the way it works. You have to keep it separate. If you're going to be paid by that company, then they, write you a check or do automatic deposit or whatever it is they do, but you don't go in and just start paying out of your account. So there's supposed to be this separateness. And that's what they're talking about here. They're talking about how the defendant, Mr. Bowers, had control over the consulting firm here. Let's see. And really and truly, that's all this is going through. 1 through 20, derive actual and significant monetary benefits by and through one another's unlawful conduct. C, that they were one and the same, essentially, were segregated to appear as though separate and distinct for purposes of perpetrating a fraud. So in C, again, okay, so they're set up to appear that they're separate, but what they're saying is, well, that was just so that he could use that as a way to really funnel money to himself. That's essentially what they're alleging here in C, because remember, it's supposed to be separate. And you see in D, it says defendants do not comply with all requisite corporate formalities to maintain a legal and separate corporate existence. So here's the thing. If they're alleging that they did not properly separate the two, and that he is basically just using the firm as a conduit to just get money to him, then no longer is just the company or corporation or LLC over here, depending upon what you have. I'm just speaking in generalities here. No longer is that a separate entity where that entity may be legally liable. Now it's you're legally liable too. The whole point sometimes of setting up an LLC is to limit the liability to the LLC and to not tie it to your personal assets, which might be your house and your car. It might be stock that you have, other business operations that you have ownership or equity in. Once you cross that barrier and you start commingling the two, and there's no distinction and no separation, then somebody can come in and sue you, and they're like, hey, they have pierced the corporate veil, because there's this veil between the two that exists if you follow all the rules. He did not. His firm did not. Therefore, we're piercing that, and now both parties can be totally liable for this. And so this is where they're going. They're not just intent on coming after his firm. They're intent on coming after him by showing that the firm didn't do what it was supposed to do too. Okay? And they're also alleging the whole thing was just a fraud. That's what they're saying. E, the business affairs of the defendants and at all times relevant were so mixed, okay, all of these defendants were so mixed and intermingled that the same cannot reasonably be segregated, and the same are in inextricable confusion. Not not just together, they are like confused together, okay? Not just fused together, but confused together. I feel like I need to come off the complaint here just to have that conversation with you. Yeah. So yeah, commingling. Okay. So not keeping it separate. It says the recognition of the separate existence of defendants would not promote justice. So remember, I tell people this all the time. Let me come back to you and have a conversation with you about this. I tell people this all the time. The idea of the justice system is to do justice. That's the whole point. Okay, the idea is to do justice. And where you have a judicial system that sets up and does things that does not do justice, at that point we have to question the systems that we have in place for our judicial system. So what they are saying here, let's go back to it. What they are saying here, wish I could move faster for you guys. What they're saying here is, on number 15 here, the recognition of the separate existence of defendants would not do justice. So what they're saying to the court is, if you recognized them separately, then that would not be right. That would not be the justice that we expect from the court. Okay, that's what they're saying. So you need to take into account this relationship, how they were confused together, and both of them are liable. All right. Let's see. Yeah, and so number 16, it says, accordingly, defendants constitute the alter ego of one another. They're essentially the same thing. They're just alter ego. It's like Dr. What is it? And D- Hyde and Jekyll. Doctor, I can't even remember. Oh my gosh, you guys are going to be picking at me in the comments on this one, but you get my point. Essentially, it's the one entity. Okay, they're just alter egos of each other, and it says the fiction of their separate corporate existence must be disregarded. So that's the first thing that they have to allege. If you're going to go in and say, hey, look, this was a fraud and this was just a conduit, you got to sort of put this out there if this is what you're going to allege. And this is exactly what they're doing. I'm telling you, they have taken the gloves off. They're going in hardcore here. They're calling this a fiction, you guys. This is a fiction. And to keep them separate would not promote justice. So it says, therefore, plaintiff is informed and believes um, plaintiff's joint employers by virtue of a joint enterprise. Oh, joint enterprise, you guys, there's some other language I could throw in here, but I'm gonna leave that out because they didn't bring that up, so I'm not gonna bring that up. But we're gonna scroll on down here. All right, so it says here, plaintiff is informed and believed. Number one, there is an express or implied agreement or assumption that they should be liable for the debts of the other defendants. It amounts to a consolidation or merger of the two corporations. They are a mere continuation of the other defendants, and the transfer of assets was for the fraudulent purpose of escaping liability. I think I have tears at this point. Accordingly, defendants and or are listed there. Defendants are the successors of one or more of the other defendants and are liable on that basis. Okay. All right. So we've got a whole history here that they have. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that. As it says there, the organization was formed to end state-sanctioned violence against members of the Black community. BLM largely operated as a network of local activists and did not seek formal business formation under any state law or nonprofit status. Usually when you're doing groundwork, when you're doing grassroots organizing, a lot of times it is just people coming together because they see a problem. And what do you do when you see a problem? Well, you work on trying to find solutions to that problem. And people come together and they start building coalitions. They start partnering with other organizations. Sometimes they then even ask for money to help with the cause. And this is what you see on the ground. And this is exactly what they're saying here. This is how it got started. There was never this sort of idea that this was going to become some sort of big entity that was going to be taking in $100 million a year or something like that. Okay, that was not the plan. They were just looking for a solution to something that they thought was unjust. So it says they started forming chapters. And then by 2016, let's see, we've got 40 chapters globally. And all of this is, even though I'm sort of going past all this, it is very important when they get into court to lay out the foundation of the organization and how it got to the point where the money was starting to come in, and Mr. Bowers and his firm's role in accepting donations and doing whatever it is he was supposed to do. So this is really important that they lay this out. I'm just not going through it because I think it's something you can go back and read in detail if you want to understand the organizational framework that took place in the very beginning. So it says in the summer, they created the Black Lives Matter Support Fund in connection with the Tides Foundation to decentralize governance over the unprecedented funds raised for BLM. So by this time, it's like, you guys, we've had all this money coming in. Okay, so we've got to get a little bit more organized about what we're going to be doing here. So BLM Grassroots at all time has been a third-party beneficiary to the grant agreement. So here's where Mr. Bowers comes in. It says, September 2020, Ms. Colors hired Mr. Bowers and Bowers Consulting to handle the administration of GNF. And let's see. Yeah, all right. He was going to serve. BLM Grassroots was assured that Bowers would just serve in the administrative capacity and provide some assistance to her. It says at all times, BLM Grassroots continued organizing and doing the on-ground work of BLM. Okay. All right. The transition. Okay. So now they have laid down the framework in this. Okay. They've they've talked about the background of how the organization got to this point. And so now they started to talk a little bit more about, where things start to change. And they say, okay, so there were some threats going on with some of the members of the organizations. And look, it says the constant assaults weighed heavily on Ms. Colors, especially. And then she decided she was just no longer going to be able to serve as lead. On May 27, 2021, she issued a formal transition plan to Mr. Bowers and Dr. Abdullah, and they began functioning as co-leads. Okay, and it says with Mr. Bowers serving as what was thought to be trusted and capable support. Okay, so again, they're framing things. The transition plan was also shared with GNF Leadership Council, which had been formed back in 2020. To support this transition, they tapped some seasoned organizers. They made public announcements, and then she resigned. And she said, with smart, experienced, and committed people supporting the organization during this transition, I know GNF is in good hands. Okay, so that's the transition. So she's now leaving as sort of the head, or who people sort of see. A lot of times people see a person as a head too. That's a go-to person. So it says, okay, now they've got this section that they're calling the usurper. I mean, this is the language that they're using here. They're being very clear. I told you, gloves off, gloves off. Dr. Bowers, I'm sorry, Mr. Bowers and the GNF Leadership Council agreed to execute the transition plan that she set up, that Ms. Culler set up. And it says, however, Mr. Bowers, who made $2,167,894 from GNF in less than 8 months, decided he wanted to keep the piggy bank that GNF had become to him and his company. Okay, so he had been doing some work for them already. Moreover, it says Mr. Bowers' ego prevented his ultimate service to BLM, as his name was not listed with respect to GNF or BLM grassroots ongoing leadership. Accordingly, instead of assisting, Mr. Bowers refused to turn over important financial and organizing documents to them. Within months, Bowers had run these well-respected advocates out of the organization. Through a series of misrepresentations and unauthorized backroom dealings, Mr. Bowers managed to steal control over GNF as the sole board member and officer. I'm not sure how you get to the point where you have just one person as the sole member and officer, but they're alleging that that is what happened here. Okay, so that's what it says here. Mr. Bowers managed to steal control over GNF as the sole board member and officer. While BLM grassroots was in the field serving the interests of the people, Bowers was exercising his stolen primary decision-making power by hiring other board members from his company, Bowers Consulting Firm, and issuing GNF grants to his consulting firm, as well as less aligned organizations who agreed to hire the firm. So this is what they're saying. They're saying there was a lack of transparency, there was self-dealing, and there was a conflict of interest. You guys, I have talked to, nonprofit organizations before, and, you have to be really careful when you start talking about self-dealing. Usually you should have an ethics policy in place that talks about conflicts of interest, it talks about self-dealing, and it talks about fiduciary responsibility in relationships so that people understand what they can and cannot do. I typically tell people, do not do side deals with your nonprofit or your foundation. Just don't do it. Pick one. Either be on the board, be a part of the team, or be the hired help. But don't try to be both, because there is almost an inherent conflict between what you want to get paid and their ability to sort of say, well, we actually need to direct funds to, some of the on the ground work. So how are you sitting in a board position and voting on something that has an impact on your pocketbook? It impacts the dollars and the coins and what you are going to bring home to yourself. Like, and even if there isn't an obvious conflict of interest like that, it just looks bad. It just looks bad. So pick a side. As my daughter likes to tell me, pick a struggle. Pick a struggle. Don't have to. All right, let's pop back over here to this to see where we're going here. All right. Well, Pick a struggle, you guys. Pick a struggle. Back to the complaint. Okay. At all times. So, yes. So, we have gone through what they're saying here. Yes. All of this they're saying. At all times, GNF continue to raise money. Okay. And it says it's now under investigation. So you've got these attorneys general who are now investigating BLM. And you've got the IRS looking at them for misuse of funds, self dealing, and other actions. Like, I don't even know what the other actions are, but yeah. All right. Um, it says BLM grassroots has never been under any investigation. Right. Okay. So the fraud and misrepresentation. Let's go through that here. What do we have? So it says on March 9th, 2022, GNF changed the passwords to BLM shared social media channels. This resulted in the social media channels portraying messages which were vastly inconsistent with the BLM guiding principles. It says BLM grassroots lost the ability to go live from these accounts to communicate on the ground, organizing efforts, campaigns, and urgent calls. In other words, we can't. How are we going to get the momentum and get done what we need to get done? Social media is it now. What do they say? If it doesn't happen on social media, it doesn't happen, right? Um, to host monthly healing justice webinars, like all of this stuff. It says was also stripped. I mean, they're listing things here that they no longer had access to. What was meant to negatively impact BLM grassroots continues to cause harm to BLM and its constituents. Okay. And then it says, it talks about one of the things that happened here. It says after requests for GNF to address the tragedy, GNF simply posted many hours later a woefully insufficient 3-word response with typos in the caption many hours after the reports occurred. It's just talking about the failure of the organization. And it says it was it says GNF's failed response suggests that they are either asleep at the wheel. They're like, pick one, pick a struggle. They're either asleep at the wheel or grossly unprepared to lead the organization through these impactful moments as our community demands. And during the meantime, of course, GNF continued to raise money. Then it talks about the intentional interference with the work of BLM. On May 4th, 2022, BLM grassroots received an email from the Tides indicating that Mr. Bowers called on behalf of GNF demanding that the funds held in the fund be diverted to GNF or alternatively not allocated to the work of BLM grassroots. So at this point, we're getting into the part where they're starting to talk about, how the money was going and the work here. And it says GNF falsely accused Tides of commingling funds and requested Tides to hold on distributing funds to BLM grassroots. So, at this point, remember, I think what they're alleging is GNF is being run by Mr. Bowers and his team. And they're saying, wait on giving this money to BLM grassroots here. So what the complaint is saying is that, hey, they were interfering with our work by interfering with the distribution of the money. Okay. So it talks here, grassroots received an email from the Tides informing them that GNF had requested that the funds be given wholly to GNF and no longer be used to support the work of BLM grassroots. You guys. So at this point, it's like, okay, so now they're taking the money away. So there was the social media and now there's the money. How do you run an organization if you don't have either one of those things? Tell me how you do that. And it said they're going to conduct a internal review, and it said over the next 30 to 60 days. And as of the day of this file, Tides has still paused distribution of the funds. So you can see that didn't stop. And so at some point in time, they may have just felt like they had no choice but to file this lawsuit. All right. So then you had the murder that took place here. Let's see, other things that were going on within the organization. BLM had an emergency meeting to discuss further financial support needed on the ground for what was going on in Akron and how to support the community efforts there. And it says July 8, Tides acknowledged that this was a type of grant that the fund was created for. It says, however, Tides denied the request, citing both GNF's inquiry into the fund and additional state attorney general inquiries into GNF, not into grassroots, but into GNF. Okay, this is at all times under information and belief, because we don't really know. GNF continue to raise money based on the work and efforts of BLM grassroots on the ground in Ohio. So again, another thing that's going on in the community. Last time it was like, you guys, we need you doing more on the social works, on the social media side. This time it's, we need monetary support here on the ground in Ohio, and we're not getting it. Okay, this is BLM continue to take credit. All right, so yeah, so that was basically the one of, you're getting in the way of us doing work financially. That particular cause of action is like, you're interfering, okay? Because we need this distribution of money to work on the ground, and you are getting in the way of that. So that's what that one was about there. All right, so let's go back and look and see what else we have here. This is a lot. Okay, first cause of action for unfair business practices. So, okay, we reallege all the other. It says unfair competition shall mean and include unlawful, unfair, fraudulent business act or practice. And this is straight from the code here. It talks about what unfair means, talks about a business act or practice is fraudulent if it is likely to deceive members of the consuming public. Okay, because remember, they said, the public thinks this money is going to the organizations, right, to do groundwork. It says defendants publicly align themselves with plaintiffs' core values and ideas, use their alignment with plaintiffs to deceitfully induce and elicit significant amounts of monetary donations from the public at large. Defendants held themselves to the public as an entity that provided funding to plaintiffs on the ground. Okay, so let me go back and read this part again. It says defendants held themselves to the public as an entity that provided funding to plaintiffs on the ground. Okay, but remember, I just told you part of what they're alleging is they told them to stop sending them money. They told Tides to stop sending them money. And yeah. It says as a result, you've got defendants substantially harmed plaintiff's reputation with the public at large. All right, and it says defendants should be made to disgorge their ill-gotten gains and restore such monies to plaintiff. All right, so that was the first cause of action. Second cause of action, intentional misrepresentation by all of these defendants. Okay. It says plaintiffs are informed and believe and allege that the representations alleged above were a false fact. Okay, so what were these allegations? It says here, Mr. Bowers made specific and false representations to BLM grassroots that it intended to follow the transition plan. In connection with the transition plan, defendants intentionally represented the plaintiffs that all of the resources GNF would be transferred to BLM grassroots and that they would continue to share the social media accounts. So they are now saying that this was a fraudulent misrepresentation. It said at the time such representations were made by defendants, plaintiffs relied on the false representations and believed them to be true. So they said that, that to what extent he had planned on actually following the transition plan. They're saying the whole thing was a fraud and that he misrepresented what his actual intent was going to be. It says that at the time defendants intentionally made these false representations, defendant knew or should have known that such representations were false, knew or should have known, and that plaintiffs would rely upon them. Of course, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, if you follow the transition plan, we've all agreed to it, we're good to go, then yes, we're relying on your statements that that's what you're going to do. And it says here, defendants intended for plaintiffs to rely on these representations. All of these are elements that are necessary to be able to show that this was misrepresentation on their part. So it says here, in reliance on these representations, defendants were induced to and did continue to share its social media property plans and data with GNF and Mr. Bowers. If plaintiffs had known that defendants were were missing using donations and were going to change the passwords on social media accounts, plaintiffs would not have taken these actions. Of course not. If you know that they're going to cut you out, that they're going to cut you out of social media so that you can't do the work, that they're no longer going to give you the money, they're actually going to tell the other organization, hey, pause that, don't give them any money. Who's going to sign it on to a transition plan that literally is your downfall? Nobody's going to do that. It says plaintiffs' reliance on defendants' representations were justified. Okay, like we were justified because of defendant's false reassurance of his intentions and his existing relationship with plaintiffs. Remember, he had worked with Ms. Colors to put this together, and Ms. Colors had said, I'm leaving this in the hands of other people, and they are good and capable people. So again, it says defendants should be made to disgorge their ill-gotten gains and restore such monies to plaintiffs. Okay, third cause of action. This is for fraud against all defendants. And it says they use their positions to falsely induce the public to donate funds. Okay, so this is like a fraud on the public who donated funds, right? It says here they had the intent to deceive and defraud plaintiffs. Plaintiffs reasonably relied on their longstanding special relationship. It says defendants' concealment and suppression of the fact that defendants had used donor funds to purchase the home on behalf of GNF intended to use the property for purposes unrelated to BLM mission and values. Plaintiffs were ignorant of the information concealed or suppressed by defendants. It says, had they known those facts, they would not have taken these actions. So again, they're saying that this is all a result of deceit and fraudulent concealment of material facts known to defendants with the intent on the part of defendants of depriving plaintiffs of their property or legal rights or otherwise causing injury here. Okay, fourth cause is for conversion. It says plaintiffs own and had a right to the possession of donated funds, and that defendants wrongfully prevented plaintiffs from having access to the donated funds, shared media accounts, and shared emails and websites without plaintiffs' consent. So they cut them out, you guys. That's what they're alleging in this complaint, that they cut them out. It says defendants intentionally and substantially interfered with plaintiffs' ownership and possessions of donated funds, shared media accounts, and shared emails and websites, and that they were harmed as a result here. Okay, it says defendants, officers, and or directors authorized, directed, and or participated in the alleged tortious conduct alleged herein, and that they are personally liable. Okay, so this is when they start doing this sort of identification of Mr. Bowers and alleging that Mr. Bowers is the one who was engaged in the above wrongful conduct. And again, they're saying they should be made to disgorge their ill-gotten gains. It says, gloves off again here. Defendants and their co-conspirators and aider and abettors engaged in despicable conduct and acted with willful, reckless, and conscious disregard of the rights of plaintiff. All right. Fifth cause of action, you guys. And that's going to be our last one, is unjust enrichment. All right, it says here, defendants improperly use donations raised on behalf of BLM grassroots for the work of BLM grassroots. It says defendants use their positions as sole director, treasurer, and officer to obtain a secret profit and or exorbitant fees. Okay, so that's sort of what I was saying before. This whole idea that when you hire these outside firms, when you hire these outside consultants, a lot of times the fees are a lot. Okay, so when do we get to determine, what's too much? And you have to match that up with the work. So right now we're seeing, okay, it was over $10 million in fees. Okay, so what do those invoices look like? What exactly was the firm being paid to do? What was the work product? What was the consequence of that? Did you get your money's worth when you were paying him, organization? And those are some of the things that are going to come out. Remember, they requested a jury trial. So those are some of the things that are going to come out. The firm, is going to have to dig deep into the files here to be able to say, here's the work that we did. This is why it was not some sort of exorbitant fee or self-dealing or profit, or that we diverted funds. This is the actual work that the firm did. We brought on 50 people. Those 50 people did these 10 things. So they need to be able to lay out a case if they have one, because otherwise it just, it looks really bad. It looks really bad. All right, so unjust enrichment. It says plaintiffs are informed and believe, and on that basis allege that the defendants use their positions as, and I already said all that, right? Secret profit and exorbitant fees. Yeah. As a result of defendants' wrongful conduct, defendants have been unjustly enriched at the expense of plaintiffs. Remember? Because they got money, we didn't, like literally, because they got cut off. Um, yeah. So, prayer for relief. Here's what they're asking for. It says, number one, they are asking for a money judgment, representing but not limited to lost donations, reputation harm, damage to goodwill, increased costs. Number two, temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, permanent injunctions, and other orders prohibiting defendant from using social media, website, and other identifiers of BLM. Number three, restitution and disgorgement, and such other orders as may be necessary to restore to any person in interest any money or property, real or personal, that may have been acquired. Um, Prejudgment interest from the date the obligation became due. Punitive damages. Award plaintiffs the cost having to even bring this lawsuit, post judgment interest, and anything else that the judge and jury finds to be appropriate. So that is it. They have asked for a jury trial. So let me know in the comments your thoughts after hearing about everything that's being alleged in this lawsuit. And thank you for sticking around. Peace.